All right, this evening, some of the songs that we just sung, got through singing, touch on the same thought, and then the songs that are going to go over tonight, I believe, kind of blend together. But thinking about that, nothing happens in this world that God our Father does not know about it. And God knows what will happen to us as individuals, as families, possibly towns, cities, states, countries. And it says, and I wrote here, while we are in this world, we share in the beauty of its creation, but also in the hardship of the sin it bears. And we can't look, I don't think, too long at either of those things without losing sight of what, or without kind of getting out of reality. If we look only at the beauty of creation, many of people, I think, have kind of become hermits because of that somewhat in life. But also, we can't just look at the hardships of sin and not maybe become a despondent person. And so those things coexist in this world that we live in. And, yes, we would prefer to be only in the beauty of God's creation, which Adam and Eve were for a small portion of time. But that will be heaven for us and not here on earth, because we know that there is sin and sin exists, and we have to deal with it. But we also have to deal with it at looking still at God and how God responds to us and how God desires that we respond one to another and with others. And, it's one thing to respond to one another that are of like mind when, we look at things through the scriptures or we look at happenings in the world. But then it's another thing to maybe need to respond to someone that is maybe a non-believer. Or even further yet, there are those that are atheists. And sometimes our paths may cross those people. Not only are we, privileged to be in the company of the saints. But tonight we want to look at a few thoughts that fit along this line. There's a scripture text there in Psalms 50 and 12 where God states, "For the world is mine and all the fullness thereof." And we want to look first at the song. It's titled, "This Is My Father's World." Once in a while, I don't always choose to sing some of these. Some of them are a little hard for us as a small congregation to do. But this is a beautiful song. We have sang it before, and I'm sure we will sing it again. But it says, "This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world, I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hands the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world, the birds their carols raise. The morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world, he shines in all that's fair. In the trusting grass I hear him pass, he speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world, oh let me ne'er forget, that though the wrongs seem oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world, the battle is not done. Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one." It says here, Malby Babcock was arguably the most remarkable student Syracuse University had ever seen. Hailing from an aristocratic family, he was a brilliant scholar with a winning personality. Tall and stilled muscle, he was an outstanding athlete, an expert swimmer, and the captain of the baseball team. He also directed the university's orchestra, played several instruments, and composed some original compositions. A proficient vocalist, he directed the university glee club, and he entertained other students by drawing and doing impersonations. On the side, he was an avid fisherman. He would have been successful in any profession, but God called him to the ministry. And after further training at the Auburn Technological Seminar, he became pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Lockport, New York. It was a beautiful area midway between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, not far from Niagara Falls. And Maltby enjoyed hiking and running in the hills outside town, telling his secretary, "I am going out to see my Father's world." He would run or hike a couple miles into the countryside where he'd lose himself in nature. It was during his pastorate at Lockport that he wrote a 16-stanza poem, each verse beginning with the words, "This is my Father's world." In 1886, Maltby was called to the Browns Memorial Church in Baltimore. While there, he traveled widely and was in great demand on college campuses. He was a fresh, engaging speaker who never failed to stimulate students. In 1899, he moved to the Brick Presbyterian Church in New York City. Here he found it more difficult to take off on his hikes. The workload was enormous, but he faced it with a stoic writing. "Be strong. We are not here to play, to dream, or to drift. We have hard work to do and loads to lift. Shun not the struggle. Face it. This is God's gift. Be strong." When he was 42, his church presented him with a special gift, a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. With great excitement, he departed by ship. While en route at Naples, Italy, he was seized, though, with a deadly bacterial fever and died at the International Hospital on May 18, 1901. Even after his death, his wife compiled his writings into a book entitled Thoughts for Everyday Living, published in 1901, and included this Maltby's, "This is my Father's world." I found him very interesting, very talented, very gifted. You know, sometimes you can like to dabble in a lot of things, but you're never a master of any. But it almost seemed like here he mastered quite a few things and could have went many directions. But yet, when God called him to the ministry, he put his whole heart then into the ministry. But he still, he enjoyed sports and activities like that took him outdoors, like in his youth. And so even as he was a pastor here, he still couldn't get away from that wanting to be outdoors and going outdoors there. And I like that where he told his secretary, "I'm going out to see my Father's world." And God used him. And I could only imagine the joy if he was so happy to see this area and content there, and then later he was pushed back to do more speaking and not being able to get out as much. When they gave him this gift to go to the Holy Land, the expectation, the excitement that was probably in his heart to be able to go and do that, but yet God had other plans. But yet, instead of maybe walking streets that Jesus Christ walked, he could only imagine in the Holy Lands, he ended up sitting, hopefully, at the feet of Jesus in heaven. So we never know. He's just at the age of 42. But yet, he had saw many things in the world, but he knew that it rested in the power and the strength of God. And that for us, it said in that last part, or the ones that's recorded, I did not look up the additionals. I figured there is 6 verses of the poem here, because it's in the middle, it brings in again, "This is my Father's world." So that means, though, there are 10 more out there that we don't know that he has written. But it says, "Jesus who died shall be satisfied." That the price that Jesus paid to redeem souls, he will reap. He will reap. And earth and heaven be one, he said in that. And then over on page 256 is the song that we did sing tonight, "Near to the Heart of God." It says here, Park University in Parkville, Missouri. Don't know if you know where that is, Larry, or not. But it's called Parkville, Missouri. He'll look it up if he doesn't when he gets home, I'm sure. Had 38 campuses across the United States. Boasted of an enrollment of over 17,000 students. It was begun in 1875 with only 17 students by John A. McAfee and by Colonel George Park. the colorful founder of Parkville who donated the land. McAfee had 5 sons and a daughter who all became involved in the college. The 4th son, Cleland, graduated from what was then Park College after studying at Union Theological Seminary. He returned to Park as a chaplain and a choir director. Cleland's daughter, Catherine, later told how her father came to write the great hymn, Nearer to the Heart of God. She says, my father's father, John A. McAfee, was one of the founders and the first president of Park College in Missouri. In the last years of the past century, his 5 sons, Lowell, Howard, Lapsey, Cleland, Ernest, and his only daughter, Helen, were all living in Parkville serving the college. My father was the college preacher and the director of the choir, and it was his custom when communion service came to write the words and music of a response which his choir could sing and which would fit into the theme of his sermon. And this is not the only one that was writing hymns for the churches to sing. So as song leaders today, we have it pretty easy to be able to pick up a book and the words are there and the music is there, because back in this day, but it was a gift from God though, a precious gift from God that they were able to do that. But many a time they were writing a song to go along with a sermon or a certain Sunday that was coming up in their churches. One terrible week, just before a communion Sunday, the 2 little daughters of my Uncle Howard and Aunt Lucy McAfee died of diphtheria within 24 hours of each other. The college family in town were stricken with grief. My father often told us how he sat long and late thinking of what could be said in word and song on this coming Sunday. So he wrote, Near to the Heart of God. The choir learned it at the regular Saturday night rehearsal, and afterwards they went out to the Howard McAfee home, and they sang it as they stood under the sky outside the darkened quarantine house. And then it was sung again on Sunday morning at the communion service. Near to the Heart of God was published in October of 1903 in the Choir Leader. There is a place of quiet rest near to the heart of God, a place where sin cannot molest, near to the heart of God. There is a place of comfort sweet, near to the heart of God, a place where we our Savior meet, near to the heart of God. There is a place of full release, near to the heart of God, a place where all is joy and peace, near to the heart of God. O Jesus, blessed Redeemer, sent from the heart of God, hold us who wait before thee, near to the heart of God. I find it interesting that here it tells how they went out to a quarantine house with a hymn to be a comfort to this family. Yes, it was, a godly family that had lost someone, but no less lost 2 precious children, a great loss there. During the COVID virus and the shutdown, if anything come out of it, there was a sense of drawing people closer together in spite of being told to stay further apart. Sure. And people found ways, we saw first some of in Italy and places, people on balconies banging pots and pans or singing, I think of the one singer that he would stand out on his balcony and sing, wrote a song for healthcare workers. He reached out in a way that he could reach out. There was those that prayed certain times, there was, said pray on a certain day of the week or every day at a certain time for towns and for countries. There were teachers out visiting students, giving them homework or, them coming by in cars and passing out the homework. There were students and their parents getting in cars and making signs and coming by schools and homes and stuff to show their teachers that they missed them, they appreciated them. There were families getting out in their cars and driving by nursing homes, and they would put the people out there so that they could at least see that the world was still trying to go on around them and to wave. And I just even think about how, they invented a way for people to go, and even though they had to reach through plastic, they could reach through that and touch their loved ones and still see them. Parades for birthdays. We had a few down our street where you're like, why is all these cars going by honking, and then you look across your neighbor and somebody tacked a little sign out there, so-and-so's now this age, or a happy birthday or something, and it was good. Or if we actually had a nurse in our community, and they went by and they had an appreciation deal and honked for her. So there were things. There were people that knew people couldn't get out because at first houses were quarantined. I remember Larry coming home saying that there was the one house quarantined out there on Fort Sill. And, they had to go and leave the lunch thing on the porch, or there was somebody picking it up so they could go do that. And other people knew that elderly people that didn't need to be out, and they would go and get things and take it and leave it on the porch, and then they would leave, and then the other people, they could come out then and get it and bring it in. And it shows in people that which the God has created in us, to care, that caring spirit of God. And even amongst people maybe that don't really know God, that still reaches out to care and the concern and the compassion. And so, I just found that so interesting. It hit me when I was reading that these people not only learned this song, but they took it to that house, because how else would they have got to hear the song? Sure. They couldn't have. And they went out there and they sang this hymn, that it would be able to touch the hearts of those that were there. And I just felt that, we can relate to that. A few years back, maybe we wouldn't have been able as much to relate to it, but we can truly relate to it today. And then one more hymn that I want to take a look at. There were those that were captive in Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to Babylon, there under Nebuchadnezzar. And in Jeremiah 29:11, it says, this is God speaking, "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." Or some say hope in your latter end. And I think here in this book it says to give you a future and a hope. God is always aware of what is going on. In all parts of history, we can totally see the hand of God and the hand of God working. And even through all this that has gone on in our land and is yet to go on in our land, God is always aware and God is always working. And even though the children of Israel were taken captive from Jerusalem to Babylon, God had ways of letting them know that he was still there with them. And some of them were strengthened during that time. He told them through the prophet to go on to live their life in that land as they needed to. It says there that in Jeremiah 29 that they were told to go ahead and marry and to go about the customs of the day. But, we know that as like some of them, as Daniel and all that, they still kept the rules and the things of God, the things that were near and dear to God, that they needed to keep. God didn't say, throw me away, by no means, but God did not expect them to quit living just because they were taken in captivity. He didn't expect them to just dry up and go away. And poof, no. God expected that there would be a people there for him to release from that captivity when the time came. And he, and for the generation to be there as it would come on down, for him to release. And so he said here, I have thoughts of peace for you and not of evil. And I think, that come to me that, I think God, that's the way it is for us. God has thoughts of peace for us and not of evil. Now, does that mean we won't see any evil? We don't have a guarantee of that. I mean, sin creates some very ugly and very evil things in our world. And sometimes we see those. Sometimes we are privileged that it's only on a screen, or maybe it's in a newspaper that we pick up. And we don't necessarily be caught up in the streets. But there are others that are out there. And they are living for God, but they get caught in the streets maybe they're trying to witness. Maybe they're just going from one place to another, from church to work or something, and they are pressed and they see evil. But God says, my thoughts are not towards you of peace. My thoughts are of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end, or to give us a future and a hope, whether it be here in this world or in the world to come. So our last hymn we want to look at is entitled, Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, dry the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. All thy works with joy surround thee. Earth and heaven reflect thy rays. Stars and angels singing around thee, center of unbroken praise. Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowery meadow, flashing sea, chanting bird and flowering fountain, call us to rejoice in thee. Thou art giving and forgiving, ever blessing, ever blessed. Wellspring of the joy of living, ocean depth of happy rest. Thou art Father, Christ our brother, all who live in love are thine. Teach us how to love each other, lift us to the joy divine. Mortals join this mighty chorus, which the morning stars began. Father love is reigning over us, brother love binds man to man. Ever singing, march we onward, victors in the midst of strife. Joyful music lifts us sunward in the triumph song of life. This little first clip here is written by the author of this book, Robert T. Morgan. Once when recovering from a bout of depression, I found this hymn very therapeutic. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, dry the dark of doubt away, it says. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us, or he said for him, me, with the light of day. Notice how every phrase of this prayer is bursting with exuberance. The Lord is our wellspring of the joy of living, our ocean depth of happy rest, as we ask him to lift us to the joy divine. The author of the hymn, Henry Jackson Van Dyke, was born in Pennsylvania in 1852. He became pastor of the Brick Presbyterian Church in New York City. Henry later became professor of the English literature at Princeton and the author of a number of books, including the still popular one, The Other Wise Men. He went on to occupy a number of eminent positions, including the American ambassador to the Netherlands and Luxembourg, appointed by his friend Woodrow Wilson. He was a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy Chaplain Corps during World War I, moderate of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church. He was a commander of the Legion of Honor, president of the National Institute of Arts and Letters, and chairman of the committee that compiled the Presbyterian Book of Common Worship. In 1907, Henry Van Dyke was invited to preach at Williams College in Massachusetts. At breakfast one morning, he handed the college president a piece of paper saying, "Here is a hymn for you. Your mountains, the Berkshires, were my inspiration. It must be sung to the music of Beethoven's Hymn of Joy." When he was later asked about this hymn, Van Dyke replied, "These verses were simple expressions of common Christian feeling and desires in this present time. Hymns of today," he says, "that may be sung together by people who know the thought of the age and are not afraid that any truth of science will destroy religion, or that any revolution on earth could ever overthrow the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, this is a hymn of trust and joy and hope." And I just thought that kind of summed up some of the thoughts that ran through these other two songs and hymns, and just the preciousness that, whatever age that we live for God, and we are in this present age and time before God, that we be not afraid that any truth of science could destroy religion, because it cannot. And that any revolution on earth would ever overthrow the kingdom of God, because God is in control. It is our Father's world. And it says, therefore, this is a hymn of trust and joy and of hope. And God says, my thoughts for you are of peace and of not of evil. And I just leave that. It was a little footnote at the end of this. His resignation from the brick church, which if you caught that, there was another pastor of the brick church there, and it paved the way for Malby Babok to be called pastor. See, the story behind this is my Father's world. And I didn't know that until I had completed the story. But they had two pastors that saw a lot about the things of God and kept their hearts. They were fortunate people to have someone that kept their hearts encouraged in the things of God. And we have that privilege too here, and we're thankful for that privilege to know God, to love God, and that we would keep our hearts encouraged in the things of God. The end might be in sight, but it is for us a glorious end.